In his work, The Art of War, Sun Tzu stresses that planning is essential for victory, arguing that battles are won even before they are directly fought. He believed that the true strength of an army rests in meticulous strategic preparation, including assessing the terrain, carefully positioning the troops, and grasping the conditions of both the army and the enemy. Sun Tzu claims that when a general finds himself in a favorable position, the outcome of adequate preparation and a well-planned strategy has already achieved half of the victory. This edge allows the army to be safe, ready to take advantage of the enemy's weaknesses without leaving its own exposed. By contrast, Sun Tzu warned that anyone who engages in combat without proper groundwork is heading for failure. Lack of planning opens vulnerabilities and leaves the army subject to mistakes and upsets. According to Sun Tzu, acting rashly without knowing all the factors at play is like handing over control to the enemy and creating ideal conditions for defeat. He therefore teaches that a commander who invests in time learning about the battlefield, studying his opponent, and judging the best time to attack or not to strike is in a better position. The Battle of Midway was a major turning point in the Pacific War between the United States and Japan. The United States, led by Admiral Chester Nimitz, had broken the Japanese naval codes and learnt that an attack had been planned for Midway. The Japanese forces were taken by surprise and lost their precious aircraft carriers, whilst the Americans suffered minor losses. Preparation and prior strategic knowledge of Japanese movements handed the US a decisive victory, changing the outcome of the Pacific War. The British Empire decided to invade Afghanistan when the First Anglo-Afghan War broke out to prevent Russian expansion in Central Asia. The British initially succeeded in occupying Kabul, but the situation quickly escalated. The British underestimated Afghan resistance and the intricate terrain. They attempted to control Afghan territory without local support, angering the tribes and stirring up resentment among the population. The British Army was also poorly prepared for Afghanistan's climate and rugged terrain, and its supply lines were susceptible to attack. The British decided to retreat from Kabul in 1842, but the withdrawal was a debacle. British troops and the civilians with them came under sustained attack along their route, and almost all of them were massacred before they made it to British India. The First Anglo-Afghan War is remembered as one of the British Empire's biggest military defeats, and a textbook example of the pitfalls of improper planning and a lack of understanding of local dynamics. This illustrates how a lack of readiness and proper planning, bearing in mind all the factors, can lead to military catastrophe, even for well-equipped and strong powerhouses. Sun Tzu addressed the concept of invincibility in a unique way. In his view, being invincible is not just about vanquishing the enemy on the battlefield, but more importantly, about averting situations where the enemy can exploit weaknesses. For Sun Tzu, this invincibility is reached by such thorough and strategic preparation that the army is rendered immune to successful attacks. He stated that a wise commander builds such a strong position that the opponent cannot find a vulnerable point to attack. He also taught that the true military expertise lies not in gloriously winning battles, but in dissuading the enemy from pursuing an attack. This invincibility is safer and more lasting, as it minimizes the risk of direct confrontation and the wear and tear that a battle entails. Invincibility starts within the army itself, assuring discipline, unity, and morale among the troops. A cohesive and properly assembled army is much more difficult for the enemy to weaken. An invincible general does not reveal his true power and willfully deceives the enemy about his strengths and weaknesses. In hiding his potential and using deception, he effectively makes it difficult for the enemy to reckon with an action that could lead to victory. Sun Tzu defended that the invincible commander carefully chooses his battles. He does not enter clashes where the risks outweigh the gains, preserving his strength and wearing the enemy down psychologically. Flexibility and adaptation are key to maintaining invincibility. An invincible general manages to use the terrain and circumstances to his favor, repositioning himself and adjusting his strategies as needed to ensure that there are no openings for enemy attacks. Mao Zedong used the concept of motion and guerrilla warfare against Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist forces during the Chinese Civil War, refraining from direct battles and instead eroding the enemy gradually. He admitted that, with his limited forces and inadequate weapons, he could not face the nationalist army in direct combat. He instead focused on covering up his vulnerabilities and moving constantly, establishing bases in rural areas, and harnessing his knowledge of the terrain to hamper the detection of communist forces. Mao's tactics eroded the nationalists, who spent substantial resources without managing to defeat the communist army. The strategic stance gave the communists an aura of virtual invincibility by minimizing their vulnerabilities and eschewing battles where they were at a disadvantage, until they could solidify their forces and eventually win the war. By applying Sun Tzu's concept of invincibility, where minimizing vulnerabilities and deterring direct attacks proved effective in historical contexts, it became clear that true invincibility lies in averting opportunities for the enemy to successfully attack. Sun Tzu stressed that tactical flexibility is a crucial skill for any effective commander. In his view, war was a dynamic setting, where the battlefield conditions and elements are constantly changing. A commander who sticks to rigid, unbending plans is in danger of being surprised and seeing victory slip through their fingers. He lectured that a true leader is one capable of adapting quickly, adjusting his strategy as needed to deal with unexpected threats and seize opportunities as they arise during battle. Predictable patterns and repetitive measures leave the army vulnerable, as the enemy can predict and neutralize tactics. He urged commanders to be unpredictable, changing their formations and movements to avoid the adversary spotting a pattern and adapting to it. Sun Tzu believed that flexibility is not just a matter of reacting quickly, but doing it with intelligence and strategy. The response must be measured and accurate, based on a careful appraisal of the new situation. This response allows the commander not only to defend himself against surprise attacks, but to use change decisively, to create an upper hand and surprise the enemy. Sun Tzu explained that a successful commander must be like water, flowing and adapting to the landscape he encounters. He must tailor his tactics to the circumstances, never holding on to a single approach. This adaptability lets the leader evade traps, capitalize on the enemy's vulnerabilities, and keep his force protected. German General Rommel proved his capacity for tactical flexibility during the Second World War by adapting the 88 anti-aircraft gun for an anti-tank role. This surprising decision was decisive in many North African battles. Rommel frequently used the 88 cannon in flexible defensive formations, allowing his forces to retain positions even under attack from superior armored vehicles. With its accuracy and penetrating power, the 88 cannon countered Allied armored formations and provided an advantage for the Germans. Rommel often redeployed these cannons quickly after engagements, preserving the element of surprise, making it difficult for the Allies to detect and neutralize his defenses. Rommel succeeded in balancing the German forces against superior Allied tanks, such as the British Matilda, and subsequently the American Sherman. This ingenious use of conventional weapons for new purposes exemplified the tactical flexibility prized by Sun Tzu. Rommel proved that the true skill of a general lies in the power to adjust strategies and use available sources in new ways. The deployment of the 88 cannon as an anti-tank weapon illustrated the very essence of tactical flexibility and allowed Rommel to overcome the limitations of his own arsenal to maintain the battlefield advantage. Tactical flexibility for Sun Tzu was a blend of prudence, speed, and constant observation. A battle is fluid, and only a leader who fully understands and respects this flux can keep the advantage, use his forces to the best of their ability, and defeat the enemy.